to Spoiler Peace Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living.
My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
And I'm Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write for the Chicago Reader, and I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
That is true.
Yowza.
On the show this week, we have two movies we're going to be talking about. We have Orion and the Dark, which is an animated film on Netflix. And we're going to be talking about The Hobby, which is a documentary about trading cards and the trading card industry. But before we dig into those, I want to mention first a shout out to our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Thank you, Heather, for your support.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
And I want to mention our Patreon. So this week's exclusive audio in honor of the late Carl Weathers, we watched the 1987 film Predator. Had a very fun conversation about the movie. There may or may not have been multiple impressions of Arnold Schwarzenegger during that.
I can confirm. I neither confirm nor deny.
We tried to get it out of our system early. We did our best. Anyway, we have a Patreon. Every week we release exclusive audio for $5 a month. You can get access to that audio. We also do monthly polls that you can vote in. So if you support the show with $5 a month, you can get that exclusive audio. You can vote in polls. We have a lot of fun over there. We get to talk about older films. And so there's higher likelihood that you've seen the movies that we're talking about and spoiling. So definitely consider checking that out over at patreon.com/spoilerpiece. Now, onward to the movies. So the first film, we're going to be hearing from Megan and Dave, who saw Orion and the Dark, which is, as I mentioned, an animated film on Netflix. Written by, says Charlie Kaufman, Emma Yarlett, Lloyd Taylor, directed by Sean Sharmitz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we have the voices of Jacob Tremblay, Paul Walter Hauser, Colin Hanks, looks like a few other people, Mia Akemi Brown, Ike Barinholtz, Nat Faxon, and some others. Our one-sentence IMDb summary is: a boy with an active imagination faces his fears on an unforgettable journey through the night with his new friend, a giant, smiling creature named Dark. How did that do in terms of plot summary, folks?
Well, that's the Netflix description, too, so it's accurate.
All right. Yay. Accurate description. Great starting place.
Good job, IMDb.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Megan?
That's usually Dave's giveaway.
Ruh-roh.
I know. So I will come out straight out of the gate. I will not mince words. I will not hide my hand. I loved this. I thought this was extremely adorable. I thought it was incredibly charming. I cried like a baby at the end. I really loved this. So at first I'm like, this kid is kind of annoying because he's like scared of everything, like literally everything. And he keeps a journal and he talks about how he's in therapy, and his guidance counselor, not his therapist, but his guidance counselor advises him to keep a journal, and what he does is he draws sketches of all the things he's afraid of. And he's afraid of bees, and he's afraid of falling off of skyscrapers. He's afraid of flushing the toilet, that it's going to overflow and flood the school. Like, he's terrified of everything. And so I was like, this is kind of obnoxious. But as the movie goes along, I was like, oh, it's actually really sweet. And yes, he's scared of the dark. And he often wakes up his parents in the night because he's scared. And they keep the door open, but then the power goes out, and so the lights aren't on, and his flashlight batteries don't work. So he's terrified. And then the entity Dark comes in and is like, hey, kid, you're always making a racket. You're always scared of me. I've had enough of this. And so basically, long story short, they make a deal where Dark says, I'll show you my world, and then you'll overcome your fears. And so he takes him for 24 hours to show him what it's like to be Dark. And then he also meets these other entities too, like Sweet Dreams and Silence and insomnia and whatnot, so on and so forth. And so this really reminded me incredibly of Inside Out. It kind of meets Monsters Inc. But it also, what's interesting, what happens is that you find out it's a story within a story within a story, because the adult Orion is telling this story of how he was scared of the dark to his daughter, Hypatia, because she's scared of the dark. And so he's making up this story as he goes along. So it's very kind of like Princess Bridey in a way. And so she then becomes a part of the story, and then it goes on, and then it turns out that this is a story she's telling to her son. And so it's like continuing on generation to generation. They're like adding more to the story and finishing the story, which I thought was very cute and very sweet. And one thing I really liked about this kind of like quest about like all of these entities and how important darkness is, because dark really hates light, and light is kind of this like comes off kind of like this cocky, bro-y guy, but really light is just like, hey, we both need each other. And then dark, like there's this really sad scene, I found it sad anyway, where dark can't be in the presence of light. Like when light is coming, he has to like evacuate essentially, or he'll die. And there's this scene where he's so despondent because he thinks everybody hates him, including his own friends like Sweet Dreams and Silence and Insomnia and all of them, and Sleep. And they're all they're like, well, we want to be in the light too, because Orion is talking so lovely. Like he's saying all these great things about daylight and all the things you get to do in the daylight. And so they're like, well, we don't want to miss out on that too. So Dark feels all alone. So he doesn't leave, and he just stands there while light comes, and he like kind of evaporates, and I'm like sobbing uncontrolled. I'm like, oh no. So anyway, but spoiler, he comes back and it's fine. Because they have to go into like his memory and his dreams and everything, and retrieve his memory of Dark to kind of reform him. But anyway, I found that really sweet and sad. But what I also really liked is Hypatia, when she's talking to her father, the adult Orion, she's like, adults make stories really simplistic. And, it's like, oh, there's a problem and everything gets fixed and it's fine. And she's like, if you're still scared of the dark too, you should have Orion still be scared of the dark in your story. Like the kid should still be scared. And I just really liked that. Like, yes, you can still be afraid. Your fear isn't just because you conquer your fears doesn't mean it's disappeared. It just means you have learned how to manage it and navigate it and work through it. So yeah. So anyway, I've talked a lot. I thought this was very delightful. I love the friendship between Dark and Orion. I think it was very sweet. I thought it was a charming story.
Well, I'll go easy then.
You can rip it apart. It's fine.
I hated
it's not going to change my opinion.
Every minute of this. Oh my God. The only character I liked was Hypatia. Everything else, I was just like, oh. I thought Colin Hanks as the adult Orion was wretched. I couldn't believe. I'm kind of amazed that I recognized his voice, because I haven't seen him in that much. But I was like, oh, that's Colin Hanks.
Distinctive, though. Yeah. His voice is so distinctive.
And then Paul Walter Hauser doing a Danny DeVito impersonation. I mean, not really.
Oh, he I thought it was a Seth Rogen.
I kept thinking at first. I was like, is that Danny DeVito? I'm like, no, he's like sounds like an older guy now. And then I was like, oh, it's Richard Jewell, and I don't know what his name is, so I looked it up. And then I don't want to be unkind to child actors, but Jacob Tremblay, I appreciate him more in Pete the Cat, where he has one line of dialogue per episode. I kind of feel like he's this generation's Cody Smith McPhee of Jake Lloyd's. So
I like Cody Smith McPhee
over Jake. I feel like this is like a poker hand. Cody Smith McPhee's full of Jake Lloyd's.
Yeah,
I like Cody Smith McPhee.
I like him as he got older.
Yes, that's fair. That's fair. He did get better as he got older. No, you're right. He wasn't good as a kid actor. You're very right.
But all of the things that you liked about this, I really didn't. It's kind of amazing. I didn't
Yeah,
like
is
the literal
amazing.
inverse
it.
opinion
Really
of
is.
this
I
movie.
didn't like the story
that's
within a
wild.
story. I actually thought it was cheating. But I mean, yes, you do tell bedtime stories if you do, and you can change the rules and this and that. But this actually, I was kind of felt like, is he trying to redo adaptation, but as an animated kids movie? And that's not really fair because they are very different, but there are elements of it. But the other thing that
Yeah.
I kept getting lost in, and we talked about this with how Predator over on Patreon feels like so many story-wise
Yes.
movies that came
Yep.
before it. I mean, when Hypatia says, hey, you should put me in the story and I'll be there as a kid with you because, like, I wonder if we would be friends when we were kids. I'm like, oh my God, it's the germ of Back to the Future. That's how Bob Gale decided to write that movie. He saw his dad's high school yearbook and was like, would I have been friends with my dad?
Yep.
And so he got the idea for Back to the Future. And just, I got Inside Out vibes
Yep.
and
What I
Toy
said.
Story 3 vibes, the way that Dark almost dies. And I found this so derivative that I was just, and I hated Orion, the character. I hated him. Just hated him. You know, I mean, Henry
Damn.
and Ted watched this with me. I was like, okay, this is probably okay for them. And the only thing that really scared them was when Dark first shows up. But Ted is like, so why is he afraid of everything? You know, it's like, well, some people are afraid of everything. And then Henry's like, yeah, he's like, why is he afraid of the dark? And I'm like, oh God, now they're going to be afraid of the dark, but they're still asleep. So
For now.
Yeah.
Wahaha. You know, it's funny that you're saying that though, because that's what annoyed me about him too. Because I'm like, why the fuck is he afraid of everything? But then I was like, you know, I can't really relate to that because when I was a kid, I was fearless. I wasn't afraid of anything. But as I got older, that's when I started getting afraid of things. So it's almost like he's an adult in a kid body, which kind of fits that he's an adult telling this story. So I think for me, it worked.
That is a kind reading. Yeah, I mean, I thought the animation was fine, nothing remarkable, but it was, I mean,
I thought it was beautiful colors. I thought there was some really beautiful imagery.
Sweet Dreams was a very beautiful character.
Yes.
I didn't really, I mean, the other thing is like, I think that in kids' movies, sometimes they equate, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's just say hugely energetic with funny. And
that's fair.
So,
looking at you, Olaf.
Looking at you, Insomnia.
I love Olaf. Oh my God.
So like
Bite
Insomnia.
your tongue about Olaf.
Yeah.
I knew that was an incendiary remark.
I will never take Olaf slander. Evan stoking fires here. I'm sorry, Dave. Please keep going.
No, I was just going to say I liked Quiet, even though it's kind of like Kirby from the video game, from the Nintendo games, but
yeah.
But it is a cute little creature that looks like a cross between a rabbit and a cat. So
it's adorable.
And I kind of liked the idea that sleep itself was always falling asleep. But
yes, and it's also Natasha Demetriou, who's so great in What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah. I think she's really funny and I think she's hilarious in that. So I was really glad.
Yeah, but the kid is so obnoxious that, you know, they're watching Sweet Dreams work, and she's giving this woman, you know, who's fearful about this presentation she has the next day, they're giving her this dream that she nails it and everyone loves her. And then the kid is like, well, what if the bully from school shows up? And then the bully from school shows up, but he's like King Kong sized and he's like destroying everything. I'm like, I think the other thing that kind of disappointed me was like, I just saw a lot of this coming, and this is not a Dave predicts the endings of things. The whole thing just,
You know, it's funny, before you shared your thoughts, I was going to say, I don't disagree with you that it's derivative. Like, I don't think this is the most unique story. Like, you know, we both are seeing its influences heavily on its sleeve. Like, it's very obvious where it got ideas from, even though it's an adaptation of a children's story. And who knows, maybe that story is very different. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
yeah, but I think it's interesting that being so derivative really was such a hindrance for you. But for me, I'm like, yeah, it kind of works, because even though it's pulling from all of these very obvious sources, to me, it's doing enough unique things with what it's pulling from. So I think that's funny that we have such divergent views on this.
I'm just glad that Hypatia finally showed up, and she's like so like grounded and pragmatic. It's like, oh, thank God someone with a fucking working brain is in this movie. Jesus.
But she's also terrified.
She is,
of the
but
dark.
she's like, for some reason though, she's smarter about it. I don't know what it is, you know? Like maybe she's lived in a time where there's just so much meta. She's like, we'll go in and fix this, Dad. You know, I don't know. So
yeah, I also like that she's a poet too,
mm.
and she's very self-deprecating about her poetry, but her dad is so supportive, and he's like, no, I'm sure it's wonderful. And like, I don't know, I just thought it was such a sweet relationship they had, and it was so lovely.
Yeah, their relationship was fine. You know, I just, too bad, you know, you've got like 7 good minutes in the midst of 100 of 80 minutes where you're just like, I want to go to sleep. Come over and smother me with a pillow. That was interesting. Sleep looks like she's killing everyone that she's putting to sleep, which is kind of funny. She smothers one person with a pillow, but then she kisses everyone on the cheek goodnight.
Yes. She chloroforms someone else.
Chloroforms someone, and she's about to hit a baby in the head with a hammer. And that's when Jacob Tremblay is like, no. And, you know, it's like, you've seen her do this twice. You know that whatever she's using dissolves into nothing. So I don't whatever.
Yeah, it is interesting how he interferes with all of their jobs.
Yeah. And then when he's talking about how great the light is, and he's just, you know, he thinks he's trying to make dark sound better for the other ones who've gone away, but he's making it sound worse and worse so that they want to go into the light. I was just like, it's one of those things where it's like, just shut up, shut your mouth, you're making it worse, you know?
But he's a kid.
I know he's a kid. But
kids
I
do
think
dumb things.
Kids do dumb things.
Adults do dumb things.
Oh, for sure. Anyway, so that's where I come down.
Well, I'm sorry you had such a miserable experience watching it.
I don't know. It was bizarre. I was just like, I was watching. I'm like, I actually checked in with myself about halfway through. I'm like, do I really dislike this as much as I think I do? And I was like, yeah, I do. So, and I want to just apologize to our listeners, because I feel like lately, last 5 or 6 episodes, I've been like, everything sucks. Fuck it. You know, so.
Yeah, anyway. Didn't you change your Twitter bio or something to like, I really do like movies despite what it sounds like, or something?
Yeah, something like, I think it was like, I really do like movies, I swear. You know, I don't know.
You just have high standards for them. That's all.
I don't know. Lately, I don't know, the pickings are slim, or I'm seeing the derivations, or I don't know. I'm just really, I'm having a hard time lately. I always look forward to watching them, but then I get 25 minutes into them and I'm like, oh no.
You're like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of primed for this because I love Inside Out so much. And I love kind of taking existential concepts and anthropomorphizing them. And I love kind of an odd couple road trip kind of story, which this weirdly is. So, and I really like Charlie Kaufman's work. So again, I had a sneaking suspicion that I was going to really like this, and I did. I mean, I don't think it's a perfect film by any means, just because it is very derivative. But everything that you hated, I loved. I just thought it was so charming and so lovely, and I think it's hard to learn how to navigate fear. And how to live with it. And I don't think this provides answers per se, but I do think it explores it in an interesting way, like how you live with it and how you manage it and how your fears can get in the way of your living, which is, you know, seems kind of like an obvious concept, but still one that I think a lot of people need to learn.
Hopefully in a better movie.
Oh, for you.
I think that no, sure. I think that the concept in and of itself isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think one of the things that's so disappointing is there's a lot of derivative stuff aside. There are a lot of good germs of good ideas here that I think were developed the
Mm-hmm.
wrong way. Like if you're afraid of everything, okay. I mean, but I think to myself, do we have social anxiety disorder, or are you agoraphobic? Like, what's the thing here? And this is just like, it's just a kid who's afraid of the dark. And it's like, well, he's afraid of everything. But it's just, I don't know. Then if you do those things, then it probably stops being fun. So for people who enjoy it. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting line. Like, you don't want to see Orion sitting in his child therapist's office and, all the board games in the back. And she's like, so are we going to talk about stuff while we play Sorry, or what are we going to do?
I don't know. That might have been refreshing, actually, to see a kid in therapy on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't know. I feel kind of torn about it because I know what you're saying, but at the same time, um, I kind of don't always love the idea of pathologizing everything. So even though it's
Sure.
very clear there's like if there was a kid like this or any human like this, there's clearly something wrong, like some severe trauma or
Right.
disorder or something. But yeah, so I don't know, but I know what you're saying. Like, yeah, that might take the fun out of it. But yeah. So I hear you.
Yeah. And see, therefore, I might make it worse for other people. So there you go.
Or maybe not. Maybe it just would have added another layer of complexity. Who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, so that's how I feel about Orion in the dark. Shutting this one in the dark. Moving on.
See, I think Megan's spoiler pieced me into wanting to see it.
Oh, yay! Well, I hope you have a better experience than Dave. That's all I can say.
I hope you do too.
Not that I'm disregarding what you're saying. I just feel like she came into this very enthusiastically, and I'm like, oh, those are sounding like things I would like. So,
okay. Fair enough.
Who knows? Shall we move on to The Hobby?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So The Hobby is a documentary. It's directed by Morgan John Fox. And we'll give you the one sentence IMDb summary. Follows longtime collectors and a new generation of buyers from the trading card industry, diving deep into the real-time trading card fever as the hobby goes nuclear. Conveys quite the ticking time bomb there.
That's quite an image.
Yeah, that's
very visceral.
That's really
yeah.
For a documentary about 2x4 cards with pictures on them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did we? What other context is necessary? Really, it's literally just kind of like a deep dive into the trading card industry. It specifically looks at 2021 to 2022. There is like a title card in the beginning that says like, "Hey, this is when we did these interviews." It seemed like things were kind of going crazy. The market was nuts at the time, and like, here we go. Here's the stuff that we got during that time period, and then there's like some title cards at the end that kind of like tell you where everybody who is a subject kind of landed and like what the overall like
kind of shows you that if the movie were made a year later, it would have been a lot more interesting.
Yeah,
definitely a different movie.
Don't disagree.
Yeah, definitely different. Yeah,
yeah. So what do we think of this one?
Should I go first this time?
Sure.
Go for it.
I'm middle of the road on this. I like collecting in general, just stories about collecting, because I, as you know, collect vinyl records and Choose Your Own Adventures. And Choose Your Own Adventures you can't collect any more of because there's a finite number. And I'm only missing one. And then I will be selling my collection for $40,000 on eBay.
That is so wild to me. I love that.
Well, the one that I'm missing is like a $200 book. So, it's hard to come by. I'm watching one on eBay right now, and the opening bid was $25, and I'm like, ooh. So, any spray. Yeah, I think that some of the people they interviewed this are really cool. Like Super Duper Danny, I like. She's very energetic, and that's the Pokemon trader. And the Boston guy was interesting just because it was like, oh, he's from around here. I can just tell. you
Yep.
know?
Yeah, between the
Totally.
accent, the hat.
Yes, everything.
Yeah. And it's just kind of, it is interesting to me to see the depths of the knowledge these people have about this particular, I don't want to say hobby, because for a lot of them, it's a business. I mean, it's a business for Super
Yes.
Duper
Mhm.
Danny. It's a business for the two guys with the podcast.
Yep.
It's obviously a business for the guy from Fanatics, even though he is a
Yep.
collector. And it's a very, the log line, the way they set it up in the beginning is there's these three like old timey, and when I say old timey, I mean 80s video clips of like old dudes being like, kids are turning this into, it's not a hobby anymore. They're turning this into like they don't say the stock market, but that analogy comes up later. So
Right.
they're turning it into the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And then the entire movie, it's called The Hobby, but then it's about how this is all, a big, huge business, which I suppose is supposed to be ironic. But I also, though, as somebody who collected baseball cards when I was a kid, it was never a hobby. It was always like, can I get the better card? Can I get the, the more, like, how much does a Mickey Mantle rookie really cost? Has anybody seen one? How much does a Mike Schmidt rookie cost? What, like Lenny Dykstra? I'm going through all the Phillies, of course. So, except for Mickey Mantle. And so the notion that and I don't think the movie is saying this, but the notion that this was ever not for monetary value is cuckoo to me. But I don't know. I feel like it kind of gets monotonous around the halfway mark because they just start telling the same stories about the boom and the people who Fanatics, was that the company name? Is Fanatics going to like, run Topps out of business, or are they going to buy Topps, or, and what are the new cards we're introducing? And it's like, well, you've already explained to me that there's baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, like all this stuff. And, it's a Madonna rookie card. Okay, great. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever your bent is, you can find, you can find
Trading
it,
card
right?
for it.
So,
yeah.
But who gives a shit? I don't know. That being said, just the collecting stuff, seeing the fans of this stuff be fans when they're kind of like happily going through their collections. When like Super Duper Danny is opening that box at the whatever.
Yeah, the like expo or whatever. It's like the box of Pokemon cards, and she's like, "Oh man, it'd be crazy if I had like a shiny Magikarp and a shiny Gyarados in here." And then she pulls both cards from that like box,
and that
like,
was
oh
cool.
my God.
I like felt her like their excitement when that happened.
Yep.
And they had the ones from the Philippines, and anyway, their business I thought was interesting, and I don't know, it's compelling to me to think about prices of cards and the auction and things like that. But then when you see the three title card or end cards, I should say, that basically are like, so everything that we told you about went to shit in the next year, and the market, it didn't tank, but it definitely leveled off.
Yes.
And it's like that's a better story if we had, and this is not necessarily the documentarian's fault. I mean, you set out to make a movie. You have presumably, as a documentarian, you have a limited amount of money. Maybe somebody bankrolled this. I don't know. And you're like, well, we can't shoot that. We can't make Hoop Dreams, so we're going to do this from this date to this date. And then 6 months after you finish, the most compelling part of the story happens. So I think that a better documentary would have been, half of the movie, everybody's riding that high, and then the market takes a shit at the 45 minute section, and then you're dealing with the fallout from that. And is Fanatics going to be able to roll this out because they've lost however many billions from their valuation, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I've gone on too long.
I like you're like, and now I'm done.
Well, I don't know if I'm servicing anything by pointing out all the flaws, but I mean, maybe I am. It depends on how you two feel about it, I guess. So one of you, Evan, you haven't talked at all.
Oh, yes.
I think this is a great concept, and I think that's what attracted me to watching this documentary. as someone who collects things, but not with any real like I enjoy collecting things, but not with like the degree of insanity of people here. Like I'm not like trying to like see how much my things are worth or like trying to sell them. I'm like a loose collector of a lot of different things from like trading cards to Pez dispensers to coins to like I just have a lot of like little collections of things. So and that at one point did include collecting Pokemon cards. Uh, so yeah, I think that was what attracted me to this, and so it was fun seeing people be really psyched about this stuff and seeing the nuances of it, especially the whole card grading system and how that can really impact the you know cost that or the amount that someone can get when they sell a card.
Mm.
I thought that was a whole interesting aspect of the subculture and
Yeah.
the weird kind of like trading cards almost the trading card like stock market that's been established of I all that stuff was really interesting and the like history of trading cards like dating back to like the 1800s and them showing things like oh this was like an Abraham Lincoln trading
Yeah.
card like hand drawn like
That
that
was
stuff I found
wild.
like utterly fascinating and wild. But I agree with you, Dave, that I feel like the documentary does get pretty monotonous because we're basically just kind of exploring the same question over and over again of like, can this truly be a hobby? Is it a business? Can you straddle the line between being an enthusiast and a business person? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And they just kind of keep presenting that dichotomy over and over again without necessarily saying something new. And then, like you said, we get to the title cards at the end and we realize, oh, this whole market fell out, or like you said, leveled off. I don't know if fell out is an appropriate degree of how things change in a year's time, but I feel like they really undersell that, and
Yeah.
I think it is an interesting angle, even if they don't have the footage of or like interviews, based on what they got to show that that's the case. I feel like there could have been more in the editing to kind of tease that that was an impact or that was coming, rather than just some kind of like straight ahead title cards at the end.
It seems like a missed opportunity to me. Yeah. Well, I buy that.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of where I landed. I was like, I kind of like this. I thought there was some really interesting stuff in here, but it did feel kind of like a long hour and a half for me, especially toward the end.
Mm.
But that's where I come down. Megan, what about you?
I have to tell you, you
Uh-oh.
guys, you're lucky I love both of you because I had zero desire to see this movie. Zero. Less than zero, probably, because I don't care about baseball cards. I don't care about Pokemon cards. I don't care about any of that. Although, sidebar, well, first I'll say about what I think about the documentary and then I'll share some of my other thoughts. I don't think this is a bad documentary by any means, but very much like both of you, especially you, Dave, and how you said like the first half. I think the first half is actually pretty good in that I was like, I don't know anything about this business or, collecting baseball cards, sports cards,
Mm.
anything. I was like, I don't know anything about it. I don't care about it. It's not my thing. But I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting learning the history of it. And like you said, Evan, the Abraham Lincoln cards and how it's been going on since like the 1880s, like that's wild to me. I had no idea that it was such a long history of that. I just assumed it came out in like the 1930s or 40s, which is still a long time, but it's much older than that. So yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's really the strength of this film is it's rooted in history. But then yeah, it just loses steam and is just treading water for the last half of this film, unfortunately. And I thought it was it's very clear. Everything is so binary in this. So the way that everything is presented in this film is so binary. It's like, well, you're either an investor or you're a collector. But even that is blurred, as they say. Like a lot of collectors do become investors and vice versa. Or, and the way they categorize cards is you're either sports or you're everything else, which is non-sports. So like Pokemon and Star Wars and Garbage Pail Kids and all of that. And what I really thought was bizarre to me is how is, and maybe there's no money here, but that from what I've read, that's not the case. How did no one talk about Magic the Gathering, which was the first like tabletop card trading game? And like, I remember Magic the Gathering. I played it. I traded cards. Like, it's wild to me that no one even addresses that. It's just strange. So I'm like, okay, so you're clearly right.
I hadn't thought about
It's
that, but that's totally true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
I think
weird.
they showed like a shot of a magic
Did
card,
they?
maybe, but like you're right.
Okay.
They didn't mention it
No.
as a phenomenon at all. But I remember at the time it was a big freaking deal. Everyone was obsessed with
Absolutely.
it.
Yes.
They were obsessed with collecting it, trading it,
Yes.
playing in tournaments. Like it was a
Yes.
huge thing.
Absolutely. And that's what's weird to me is that there's zero mention of it. And because like, I'm glad you saw the shot because I didn't even see any shot of it. But it's weird because, okay, you're covering the history of it and you're covering the business side of it and you're covering the fan side of it, but you're not even covering all cards. So you're not even being in a, an expansive or inclusive documentary on that, which is just bizarre. And it's funny. And so, the other part of the film I did like was when they were talking about the card shops and how, and how that's really the lifeblood of, for fans and collectors as well as investors. But what it was funny is that it reminded me because, like I said, I don't collect cards. I did trade into Magic the Gathering, but very loosely. I don't collect that. What I do collect is comic books. And comic book stores were something I spent a lot of time in when I was young. And there's there's overlap there because there were a lot of cards in comic book stores and a lot of what they're talking about. I'm like, I could relate this to comic book shops. And, when you're talking about buying comic books, again, you're talking about rarity, you're talking about art, you're talking about getting every, issue. It's kind of a similar thing. But I still found myself so bored through most of this because I found that this didn't really have a thesis or a message other than kind of slapped on at the end, like, oh yeah, it's all about nostalgia. That's why we have these cards. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, but none of the film is really showing me that that's what it's about. Like Danny, who does the Pokemon cards, like, yeah, she was talking about all the relationships she had and the friendships she made. And like, oh, even if I didn't have Pokemon cards, I'd still have all these friendships, which that's very lovely and very nice. But aside from her, I didn't feel anyone really talking about like, oh, this reminded me of, actually, I take that back. One person talked about like when they were a kid and they shared cards with their dad. I think it was Sharon's partner who was talking about that. And so I'm like, okay, but so much focus was on the business. So much focus was on the fluctuating market and on the worth of this and how much people were paying for this, that all I kept thinking about was capitalism. And I'm like, well, fuck capitalism. I don't care about this. And like, it just was driving me cuckoo about like it was just really frustrating for me. So anyway, I was bored through most of this. I was very frustrated. It started off strong. I was kind of intrigued and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn the history of this. That's cool. And then there's so many things that I was like, well, what about this? What about this? Why aren't we focusing on this? Why aren't we going in this direction? So I just think it's massively missed opportunities.
Yeah, I'm definitely, you and I are of the same vibe that like about the halfway mark, you're like, this just became a whole lot less interesting.
Right.
Yeah. It started out very well paced, and I
Yes.
think edited, and then it just lost it. It just completely unraveled.
Yeah, it was almost like a different editor came in or something. It was weird, or maybe they ran out of material and they're like, shit, we don't have a feature length film here. I don't know. But, it's funny that you both were talking about like, especially you, David, you were talking about how like the interesting part was when the market like maybe
took
not
a shit
sank
is what
or
I
tanked.
said.
Yes, you said took a shit. When the market like vacillated so wildly, it is, and you're right, maybe they did run out of money, but to me, if I was the filmmaker, I'd be like, listen, we got to go back in. We got to re-edit some stuff.
Sure.
We got to go back in and talk to some people. Like, even if it's just an extra 5 minutes, 10 minutes,
Get
something.
all those people on the phone.
Yes.
Even if it's like us like recording our fucking Zoom conversation.
Right. Exactly. Which I thought was interesting because they kind of show that, not them per se, but they show the Ringer podcast doing that, where they're talking to that guy Luber who's like constantly popping up, and they have a Zoom conversation. And by the way, that guy was fine, whatever, but I'm like, he's in it too much. I was like, I want to see more other people rather than him.
Yeah.
He was like dominating.
I was really surprised how much he's in it. I'd heard of him before because I vaguely remember, that the acquisition. But I was very surprised that he was like a or rather a card collecting person. I figured it was some, venture capitalist. Nope. I mean,
Right.
by default, sort of. De facto, maybe. He wasn't a very compelling speaker. So
no.
I think
So
the
it's
more
like, why would you fixate so much on him? Which is weird.
I think the more compelling people are Sharon and
absolutely
Super Duper Danny and the boss, the two podcast guys.
Yes, they are.
The Orthodox guy who had like so many cards that he had them in a vault.
Oh my God, that was worth like $10 million.
Yeah, he's like, yeah.
Or the Card Father guy, as obnoxious as his nickname was, it was like he went. Because he called himself the Card Father.
Yes,
like,
he
okay,
did.
You can't do that thing where you make up your own nickname.
No.
Sidebar on that, though, when he went down to the basement of his store and it was like, we have like 1 million cards, like literally millions of cards down here, and they're all organized by like person's names. So you just like pull off the shelf. I thought that was insane to me.
That is. Yeah. Or what about the guy, I think his name was Paul, the guy who was on the Pawn Shop show, who was like the king of Pokemon or whatever. Like, why are we, he was like an afterthought. I was like, why don't we see more about him? Like,
yeah, if he's the fucking king of Pokemon,
right?
Jesus.
Right? It just, there's some weird choices made. Really just, I don't know. I don't know why we focused on some people and not more on others. I don't know.
Documentaries are hard to make, man.
Yes.
That's very true. Very, very true.
Evan, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was going to say this feels like the kind of documentary where it's like you picked a couple of your friends and you just focused on them and didn't actually branch out to try and talk to other people.
Wow.
Well, I think you're right, because there is that scene where that Luber guy is at the like convention and he's like, oh, hey, here's Sharon, the person I was telling you about who's amazing. And it's like,
yeah.
So wait, the documentary filmmakers didn't find her on their own? Like, I mean, like, and part of me is like, well, that makes sense that somebody would recommend somebody. But considering all of the other issues and how you just said that, like, it's their friends, I'm like, maybe that is what they did. I don't know.
Yep. I hadn't thought about that. I do remember that scene though. So, because I just watched this today. Huh. Wow. Maybe we should make a documentary about this documentary. I don't know.
I'm by no means a documentary connoisseur. But I will say I often have so many questions around documentaries, like why I guess around films in general, like why certain choices were made, but particularly around documentaries. I'm like, why were certain choices made? Why was this edited? Why was this person? Why are they a talking head? Why are we following this person? Like, I always want to know more about the choices that were made. And this one just confounds me.
Yeah. I interviewed a documentary editor once, and she was talking about how, like, you shoot all the footage and then you just kind of look through it and you start to see where the story is, and what you have is what you have, and how you decide the story or point that you're trying to make is often just by looking at the footage. So it's like, I feel like that's a huge problem that people face. Is like, what do they have? What do they have to work with? But I feel like there are ways to like get around that. Like, you were both saying, like, you could call people back on the phone, you can get people on Zoom, you could make some graphics or some things to kind of like convey more of what your point. You could hire someone to do a little bit of voiceover to like talk, you know what I mean? There's other storytelling methods that you could use to kind of fill in places where you might not have the footage to tell what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and let's just assume for a minute that it's a monetary thing and not, a failing of journalistic acumen. Like, just, your iPhone has a 4K lens,
Yeah.
Get on Spirit Air, suck it up, go wait outside the person's office and put the little microphone clip on the top and just fucking shoot it. I went to journalism school. I know how this shit works. So Like when someone says they won't talk to you, it's like you go fucking wait out their office until they come out for lunch, and you're like, you got 5 minutes? And they're like, oh, fine. And then they give you the quote, your pull quote. Anyway, I'm sorry, Megan, what?
No, that's okay. I could listen to you talk about journalism for like ever. It's so fascinating to me, and you're so passionate about it. I love it. And you're passionate about like so many things, but especially about journalism. I love it. That's why it was so fun hearing you talk about when we talked about bad press.
Oh, yes.
Which is so good, of course. But yeah, I mean, the other thing too is that there are multiple documentaries that I've seen where the story, like they go in thinking they're going in for one story, and then throughout their investigation, their interviews, whatever, it meanders and it ends up being a very different film about a very different topic. And who knows, maybe that's not the case with about card collecting, but again, I don't know. I think, I don't know, maybe they didn't have a point. Maybe other than just, hey, we want to focus on card collecting. And that was literally it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just not the kind of movie I want to watch. That like I want to see like what is the point? What is the takeaway? What is the bigger message here? What are you trying to share? What story are you trying to tell? Because to me, those are the best documentaries. Like, what story are you telling? Because documentary filmmaking is storytelling. It's just a different venue for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of documentaries like you described where they're making one thing and then they end up making a different thing. And the only thing I can think of off the top of my head, and this is not a great example probably, is Super Size Me, where he thought this was just going to be like kind of a lark. And then he got really, really ill while he was making it. So
yeah, I think I haven't seen this documentary, but from what I've heard, the Tickler one is like that. The Painter and the Thief is like that. And there's others too that are escaping me.
Okay. Well, now I know what I'm watching this weekend.
Well, you've seen The Painter and the Thief.
Oh, I have. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
we covered it.
That is a really good documentary.
That is a great documentary. But yeah, I know, like, I knew you were, I knew it would come up, like, what are those other documentaries? And I'm like, damn it, I can't think of them. But yeah, those are two that come to mind.
Yeah. Hands on a Hard Body. Does that one count? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Although I do like the idea of just keeping your hand in a hot truck for as long as you can. So.
Yikes.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, it seems like we're all in agreement.
I know. I'm kind of shocked. Yeah. I thought I was going to be the one, the like outlier, because I wasn't a baseball card collector. And that's the other thing too, is I kept thinking, I was like, well, maybe this isn't, connecting with me in the way it should or resonating because I'm not a card collector. So I knew you two were big collectors, and certainly interested in the topic. So that's why I was really curious what you two thought about it. Cause I was like, oh, maybe it just doesn't connect with me because I don't know anything about this topic. But I guess not.
I think it's just, unfortunately, not what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
a shame.
I know it is, but again, I don't think it's a bad film by any means.
No,
I don't
it's
think
not bad.
Badly made.
I think it's just some unfortunate choices, and who knows why they were made. We're never going to find out unless the filmmakers like get angry at us and like call in.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Sometimes the directors, people work on a movie, do listen to the show. We do hear from them occasionally, and I'm always happy when they're happy with what we've said, and I kind of like think in the back of my mind, oh God, how many times has somebody listened to this show and they're just like screaming in their car or whatever, whatever it is that we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we've received 0 nasty grams from filmmakers.
That is true.
There's first time for everything.
Yeah.
I know. It's going to happen. One of these days, it's going to happen.
Okay. So to recap, Orion in the Dark sounds like, Megan, you would recommend it. Dave, you would not.
Yeah, it's a split ticket.
I would definitely recommend it.
That's available on Netflix. You can watch that there. And it sounds like, unfortunately, none of us would recommend The Hobby, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But them's the breaks.
Yeah.
Them is the breaks.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's it, right? What am I forgetting anything?
No.
That's okay. glad I asked. So that wraps up another episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. We'll start by saying a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Clamor. Otto, thank you so much for making us sound great week after week.
Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, but you can also find us at our website, spoilerpiece.com. We're on social media. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and I guess we have a Threads as well.
Yeah.
We do.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call.
At 862-21-PEACE.
Tell us what you think of Orion in the Dark, or if you happen to catch the hobby and you think we're totally in the wrong, love to hear from you as well. And if you really, really like the show, please consider rating us and reviewing us and going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. And I know I normally say that about Patreon, so I'm going to say if you really, really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. At the top of the show, I mentioned this week we're talking about the 1987 film Predator in honor of the late Carl Weathers. And we do weekly exclusive audio for our patrons, $5 a month and up. You get access to those episodes with a back catalog in the hundreds, at least 200 plus bonus episodes that you get access to, in addition to the 500 episodes we've put out of this show.
Woohoo!
Yeah, woo! So definitely check that out. You also get to vote in monthly polls. So it's a lot of fun. We enjoy putting out those segments, and we really appreciate the support. So my name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Skies. It's a lot to remember now. As Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
My name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Opinion S World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion S.
And my name is Dave Riedel. I write for the Chicago Reader. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Sky, I'm Dave Sees Movies.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.